So these days have all these names. These Yamim Noraim, these days of awe. But I have to ask, especially after such a long year, why do we need 10 full days of awe? And why are the services so long, especially on Yom Kippur, and especially when Yom Kippur falls on Shabbat? When I was younger, I thought it was fun to run around and see everybody come to Temple Israel in Minneapolis or Beth Elohim in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and see everyone in their finest. I found it strange that people in Minneapolis, even if it was 80 degrees out, were wearing their finest mink coats. But it is a day where we show up in our finest for ourselves, for God, for our community. And then once I got older and I realized, wait, we're supposed to spend the whole day at synagogue? It's not just to keep us busy and keep our minds off fasting. We have plenty of other ways we can distract ourselves, don't we? Especially all the things and items and screens that we might have in our pockets or on our wrists. I think there are several reasons for this elongated experience in synagogue. I just want to talk about two of them right now. First of all, the music, the prayers, the rituals, especially on Yom Kippur, have the potential to inspire us to think and feel differently about our lives, about our relationships, in ways that might help us be that better version of ourselves in the year ahead, that might help us feel the regret for how we might have screwed up and do better next year. The second reason is that we need time. We need this pause in our lives because of how transformative it can be if we allow ourselves to get totally immersed in it. It's like a mikveh, the rabbis tell us, a bath. Think about Yom Kippur as being at a really prestigious, expensive 24-hour retreat in the most beautiful place on earth, maybe with the most inspiring people you know, or the people you love the most. Yep, we need this time out of our daily lives and schedules to allow for that honest and deep self-reflection, to give us some time and space to help us answer the oldest, perennial, and most awesome human question there is. How do we live a good life? Chaim tovim. Who do we want to be, and what do we need to do in order to live our one short life to its fullest potential? In trying to answer these questions, one contemporary expert, Professor Keltner, a world-renowned professor of psychology and ethics and a popular teacher of the science of happiness, and the author of a best-selling book entitled Born to be Good, The Science of a Meaningful Life. So he has been, for me, an interesting source of late, especially because his newest book teaches that the way to finding the answers to those big questions is through finding awe. Awe. Yamim Noraim. The days of awe. But the subtitle of Keltner's new book called Awe is, are you ready for this? The New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. His research may be new in terms of scientific evidence, but the power of awe has radiated through Jewish tradition for centuries, and it is especially available to us during these high holy days. According to Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, perhaps the greatest Jewish spiritual leader of the 20th century, Judaism offers us a way of regularly experiencing amazement, awe, and wonder because we're asked to pause and say the blessings that we say, to celebrate the moments that we celebrate. In fact, Heschel says that these are all essential experiences and responses to the blessing of simply being alive. Judaism, as what I like to call an operating system for life, you need a system, so you might as well choose Judaism, especially if you're here tonight, or at least learning about it here tonight. Judaism is a great system for living a meaningful life, and it is different from most scientific studies that you can find on many, many bookshelves today about how we find meaning and that awe that is so hard to describe. But Judaism is focused on much more than the individual and how experiencing awe can benefit us, our health, our skin, our success, our concentration, our memory, greater connection to the natural world and to the universe, all those things. Jewish tradition likes that stuff too. But it also insists that an awe-filled existence only really matters if, one, it's experienced in community, and two, it leads us to change our behavior in a way that has a positive impact not just on ourselves, but on others and on the world. So we've got one of those things taken care of tonight. We're here in community. But how can we really change? One aspect of the transformative potential of Yom Kippur lies in this basic idea that no matter how flawed you or I may be, God, the whole of Jewish tradition, has faith that we can become that better version of ourselves. And if you don't believe in God, that's okay. That would be very Jewish too. But it's still awesome to know that the negative parts of who you've been in the past don't have to determine who you will be in the future. Despite everything we've done wrong or failed to do, one of the main messages of these sacred days is that God still believes in each one of us and in our capacity to change. So today, the real question is whether or not each of us really believes enough in ourselves and in our own capacity to change. Especially on Yom Kippur, we repeat this mantra about God being merciful and gracious and generous. It's part of what we say in Adonai, Adonai. It's part of the 13 attributes of God. But if we think about just two of these attributes and how we're supposed to imitate them, I want to suggest that the most important ones tonight are Rachum, Rachamim, being compassionate, and Chanun, being generous. How can we do that? Well, first of all, if you're generous in spirit, you will give other people the benefit of the doubt when they do something wrong. Kaf zchut, we call it. Maybe what they did was really just a mistake. Maybe they just didn't get what you wanted them to do. Maybe they're just a little stupid. Or they don't really understand who you are. Maybe they don't even care that much. Or maybe that other person is simply imperfect, just like you and me. So, on this holy evening, consider this. As we move through the days ahead, instead of getting all angry and judgy about that other person, ask questions. Come to them with curiosity and listen with curiosity. Maybe you missed something. On Yom Kippur, I'd like to call this sacred listening. Over and over again during these days of awe, we call out to God to hear us, listen to us. Shema kolenu avinu malkenu. Hear us, our parent, our sovereign. Hear us, see us. These days are about being better listeners to others and to ourselves. Perhaps we need all these hours together to give us enough time, the chance, if we're really open to it, to hear what the Machzor calls the kol dmama daka, a still, quiet voice that's inside us. For some of us, that voice is an echo of what God is trying to say to us. For others, we might be searching to hear the wise advice or to feel the love of a lost parent, spouse, or friend. And for others, that still small voice we need to hear is our own conscience, or the voice inside of us that helps us figure out what our deepest truths are, that helps us figure out who we really are, and then cheers us on toward becoming that person. Sometimes we need a great shofar, a shofar gadol, to wake us up, and other times we just need a day like Yom Kippur, a day for quiet reflection, to be able to hear the still small voice of our souls. There's a story in the Talmud that I love and I've recently come to see completely differently. It's a story about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son. Both of these guys were known to be really, really stubborn and judgmental. In other words, they weren't known for being loving, kind, or compassionate. And I'll tell the story in a really, really brief way, much more briefly than I am wont to do, based on a teaching of my friend Rabbi Josh Feigelson. Here's how he tells it. So, these guys were so stubborn and so harsh in their constant judgmentalism about all these other people and what they were doing that their stubbornness eventually lands them in trouble with the Roman government. We're talking about the 1st century. These guys are forced to hide away, and they wind up spending 12 years in a cave. The Talmud describes the scene. There's a miracle, a carob tree, and a well of water, and so they can drink, and they take off their clothes, and they sit up to their necks in sand. Yes, very weird. And the whole day they study, and when it was time for prayers, they get dressed, and then they take off their clothes again to keep them from wearing out. Eventually, Elijah comes and tells them the emperor is dead, and they can leave the cave. Thank you, Josh. I normally spend like hours telling all that. Okay, so they come out of the cave, but here's the interesting thing. It turns out when they come out of this cave, it was like they were in their own echo chamber. And it only made things worse. They kept looking only at their own AI-generated pages of Talmud. They kept seeing only negative things about the other people in the world. They were in their own echo chamber, and it made things worse. And they became even more judgmental than before. They saw people going to work and doing the regular things of life, building bridges and buildings and markets, and they would just get more and more judgmental and angry. Why aren't they praying? These people are awful. And the Talmud says that when everything they looked at just burned up, like Superman with uncontrollable heat vision. So God says, oy vey. Well, how Josh tells it, God says, dudes, I didn't give you 12 years inside a cave only to have you come out and be so angry that your judgment-angry gaze destroys everything in my world. Get your heads screwed on straight and fix your souls. That's how I see it. So he sends them back into the cave for 12 more months. When they came out this time, they seemed to have come from a different place, maybe from a retreat center, or maybe from therapy, or maybe from a day of Yom Kippur. And instead of seeing what's wrong with people, they start to see what's right with people. The heat vision turns into kindness vision. It's even more startling that this guy, Rabbi Shimon, that's kind of made out to be this harsh, judgmental villain, actually, after he goes through this transformative experience, even becomes the guy that some say wrote the entire Zohar and founded mysticism and Kabbalah. What Rabbi Shimon and his son ultimately learned was a better way of being in the world. Derech harachamim, a way of compassion. This way of compassion, says a commentator named Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, this way of compassion means that we deeply internalize that God, or something sacred, is in every single person and in everything. That means that if you see something in the world that makes you feel a strong sensation of judgmentalism or righteous anger, you should pause. Consider the possibility that along with the imperfection that you think you see, there is also something precious, some divinity, some godliness, something in them that is also within you. Consider that whatever you're seeing or sensing that is so wrong in someone else is actually there so that you can see it in yourself, so that to teach you something about yourself. When you do this, says this commentator, how you look at people, your eyes will soften, your heart will soften. The judgmentalism will be replaced, or at least tempered, by compassion. What if, for each of us, Yom Kippur is like that transformative cave experience? What if the next 24 hours, 22 hours, can be for us a time when we go inside that retreat center, this retreat center, when we think about how we see people in our lives, how we think about our situation, and figure out how to lessen our tendency to be so critical of others, to help us think about when we get so impatient and angry, perhaps we don't need to. Perhaps we, like Rabbi Shimon, can emerge from Yom Kippur better able to see not what's wrong with the world all the time, although there is certainly much wrong with the world and the people around us at times, but perhaps we can increase how much we see that is right with them. Perhaps the experience of Yom Kippur can help us let go of some stuff we've been carrying around. Perhaps we'll be able to see the world with new eyes, eyes of appreciation and rachamim, compassion. So much of our lives, our world, our politics, and of course our social media universe is so filled with judging. There's so much anger out there, especially right now, righteous indignation, and so little opportunity to actually communicate with people and ask them questions to understand better. There's so little compassion and so little opportunity to find out what's also right in these other people. Yom Kippur, especially this year, it's here to ask us, even demand of us, to pause and experience this ultimate Shabbat and set aside as much as we can all of those hard, angry, loud, short of breath sensations, those angry responses. Yom Kippur invites us, even demands of us, to cultivate the seeds of compassion within us. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son are ultimately, just like all of us, works in progress. Perhaps we can do a better job of accepting people for who they are and not be so focused or so disappointed in who they are not. Each of us, every person in our lives, is likely on a complicated journey encumbered by our best and our worst habits and desires. On this Yom Kippur, let us turn to people and hear them not just say, "How are you?" not really wanting or having the time to listen to the answer, but ask it differently this year. Say, "What's going on with you?" And if they dare to say something honest or share something difficult, even before you try to help fix it or solve a situation, try saying this: "Wow, I hear you." Or "That sounds hard." Or even, "I'm here for you. If you want to talk, I'm here to listen." May the year ahead be for us, no matter what happens in the world around us or in our country. May the year ahead be for us a year in which we cultivate the seeds of compassion within ourselves and merit being able to act with compassion toward as many people in our lives and in our larger Jewish community and among the Jewish people and all people as possible. Ultimately, this way of compassion, this derech harachamim, is the foundation. In fact, it's the one condition of how we must relate to others and to the world that can ensure that our lives will have meaning, that our lives will be chayim tovim. This is the only way we can build a better world for ourselves, for our children, for the future. We must find that capacity, that way of compassion. We must do this so that we can build a world from compassion and love. Olam chesed yibaneh. May we build a world from love, from our love.